You young men that just walked in, if you could have, we could have you sign in the middle of the room, if you're here for a merit badge purpose. Well, ladies and gentlemen, we welcome you tonight to our American Fork City Council meeting this January 23rd of 2018. Our agenda has been posted on the state website and in various places. And would remind you as well that we have a live stream that will happen, and it is archived and placed on our website so that everybody can see this and refer to it. We will follow the agenda as outlined. We will first start with I will lead you in the Pledge of Allegiance, followed by a prayer from Council Member Christiansen, and then I will conduct the roll call. So everybody would please stand.
To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Our eternal Father in heaven, we come before thee this night as we are gathered together to conduct the business of American Fork City. We're grateful for the opportunity that we have to live here. We're grateful for the good people that we associate with and for the heritage that we have and for the opportunities that we have. We pray for thy Spirit to be with us this night, to help us to think clearly and to communicate well so that we may understand the concerns and the things that are before us, so that we may be wise, that our hearts and minds may be open, and that we may have thy Spirit to guide us in our endeavors. We pray for those who are serving in the military and protecting the freedom that we do so enjoy. And we ask thee to bless them and their families. And we ask these things in the name of thy beloved Son, Jesus Christ. Amen.
Amen. Okay, I'll now conduct the roll call. Councilmember Christiansen.
Here.
Councilmember Shelton.
Here.
Councilmember Barnes.
Here.
Councilmember Carroll.
Here.
Councilmember Taylor.
Here.
Okay, we have a full and complete council and can conduct the business of the city. I'd like to have, if you might, and it's probably about half the audience from what I can tell tonight, if you're here for a merit badge purpose, if you're a scout, would you please stand? Pretty good looking group. Well, we appreciate you being here. We offer a special welcome to you and hope that you'll learn something here tonight. And we would welcome you to, as you earn the rank of life and you're looking to pursue your Eagle project, we would like to say that the burden upon that project comes upon you to kind of take a look around and see what you think is a need. And when that need arises and you feel like the city can be of an asset to you through whatever materials or whatever you might need to improve your city, then we have a website that you can refer to, and the city is very, very happy to help you out. And so, but we wish you well, and hope you'll continue to work hard and to the rank of Eagle. It's very worth your time. So thank you. You can be seated. As you're seated, I would just like to state as well that it's very often as young men, and I would probably classify myself as this when I was your age, is that sometimes we don't look at our leaders and recognize the tremendous work that they put in, both the women and the men, the hours that they take off of work each week, the weeks they spend for summer camps and for all that they do. And I'm just going to issue a challenge to each one of you young men to make sure you express that gratitude openly to the good men and the good women that serve you to help you to be better people, okay? Yeah. Maybe we could have the leaders stand. And maybe if you could just introduce yourself just from where you're at, that would be fine.
George Jacklin, the Scoutmaster.
Dustin Goodman, the Assistant Scoutmaster.
Matthew Solomon, 11-year-old scout leader.
Great. Thank you, guys. Appreciate you being here. It is now that time in our meeting where we have a 20-minute public comment period. We would ask you to keep your remarks short. Mayor Green has asked to come forward at this time. I'm going to just let him come up first, and then we'll any others that would like to speak to the council, address them, key staff, or we'll be happy to have you come up. So, Mayor Green, we'll let you lead out.
Thank you, Mayor. It came to my attention last week that the mayor of Lehigh and the mayor of American Fork were to meet to discuss another division of my farm. I certainly wish they would have come and talked to me beforehand, because anybody else doesn't have anything to say about it. The road that they're projecting through there will end up having the same result as the last time the city attempted eminent domain in American Fork. You may have been on the council when that was tried. Went to the judge with incomplete information of purpose and payment, and ended up getting it thrown out of court. That's exactly what will happen to this road when subsequently the portion of the ground down there that is the adjacent pasture, the one that you were discussing with the mayor of Lehigh, I understood.
That's I have not talked to the mayor of Lehigh, Mayor.
So it did not take place.
No, it had not taken place. Nothing like that has taken place.
I want the council to know, and the citizens at large, of which I have a family interest that goes clear back to the very beginning of American Fork. I have a deep love of this community, at least I have had. It's getting tried at times, but at any rate, that land down there, if someone's going to take it for a road or any other purpose, you better have your ducks in order, because I will fight to the death to prevent what you're trying to do without the information in hand and the money in hand. The pasture is not for sale. The roadway, at this time, the entire length of that monstrosity is not for sale. I still haven't figured out where anybody intends it to go, and the last I heard from the mayor of Lehigh, they didn't want it because they don't want the traffic dumped in their community, which is exactly what would happen. I think this council is a new council. Clark, Stacy, Barbara, you're all new to this council. Clark, I had on my council. We didn't always see eye to eye, but we were there. And we got a few things accomplished. Library, the temple was completed with the underground circulation system. We bought more park area for this community as a council than exists anywhere in the county. So we weren't sitting back on our hands any more than you guys are going to. But at any rate, The land down there, if you're going to come after it, you better go get the state, which has told me they didn't want it. So why is American Fork going to fund an 8-lane highway for the state of Utah that they don't want? The people of American Fork do not deserve to be burdened with that kind of a purchase, and that's what it's going to take. And let me tell you, the cost of that land, as has been contracted, is $337,000 an acre, and that includes portions of the pasture. I don't know that the people of American Fork want to pay $337,000 for a couple of playthings, unless in the back of someone's mind they see in the future the opportunity to resell it as a profit. Your friend Mr. Doolin, I couldn't at the time. I don't want that to be in the back of anybody's mind. The property is mine to sell for my family, extended family, going clear back to my father and his grandchildren. Make no mistake about it, I will fight to the end, and it might be the end of me. I have my 1 foot on a banana peel, so you got easy pushing.
Just real quick, Jess, if I could interrupt you real quick. I think my understanding is where we're at on that road is we had a presentation from MAG, and my understanding was that was going to be part of a larger study that was going to be including multiple agencies and cities coming together. So as far as my knowledge goes, I haven't received anything on the council talking about eminent domain. I haven't heard anything about
They keep
anything else.
me from developing the land. They've already incurred a cost of about $700,000 in lost time. Keep wrapping it up, guys. Anyway, I thank you for the opportunity of addressing you. I don't want the road. In reality, you don't want the road. None of you do, even though you have been convinced otherwise. I thank you for the opportunity to address you. I may be an old tiger, but I'm still a tiger.
Thank you, Mayor. Any others that would like to address the council or staff at this time? If you'd please state your name.
Mayor and City Council, my name is Dan Fugel, and my brother and I have property here in American Fork, just south of 700 North. We bought this property about 25 years ago, and at the time, it was an old gravel pit. And you can look at that overhead there. Originally, this is probably just a history lesson. Originally, years ago in the 30s and the 40s, there was a fellow by the name of Irwin Johnson and his brother that had a screening operation and a gravel pit that provided gravel for a lot of people in the American Fork community and the communities around. And also, they provided gravel and for foundation work at Geneva Steel when it was being built. Geneva Steel, they began the building of Geneva Steel in 1941, and it was completed in 1944, just a year before the World War II had ended. But out of this pit, we call it the pit, the gravel pit, but as far as permitting goes and with the state, it's called the Nils Fugel Sons Company Land Recovery Class 4 Landfill. And it was vacant since the late 40s for about 50 years until, and a little further on, until we were able to purchase that property from Stephen Warnick. And then we subsequently bought the property that was just west of there from the Alt family. And it's been a landfill operation primarily, or really only for our company, Nils Fugelson's company. But I remember as a young boy, probably about 60 years ago, when I was about 10, we used to come up and play in that pit. And there was a pond there. And there was a raft, and we kind of played like we were Tom Sawyer in floating around the raft and with the raft in the pond. And there was always a lot of water there. And a lot of it came from irrigation, from the north fields. And that diminished over the years and has really diminished now, any water, because of the piping of the Murdoch Canal. But when we first bought it, and in the permit, it states the current zoning of the property remains unchanged, and it still remains unchanged from its original rural designation. This property was used as a gravel pit in the 40s and has sat vacant for at least the past 40 years. The filling of this pit will reclaim it to its original surface and land contours and provide a much improved site and usable property in the future. And that was our intention when we purchased that. Of course, we as a construction company needed to, we dig a lot of holes all over the valley here, a lot of trenches, and there was a lot of spoils from that. And it was a real nice place to be able to have that and reclaim it. And if you can go up there now and see how it's how it looks now, if any of you have any concerns about that as it's getting to its final closure. But that's just a little bit of the history. My brother Guy will tell you a little bit about the closure plan here.
How we doing, Mayor?
You know, I'm envious of your council room, so I'll say no more. So I guess that's why you're the big brother and we're the little sister over there. So anyway, but and your technology, we're struggling over there, but hopefully when our new council chamber will be. But we'd just like to address, my brother gave you some of the history, and I know there's been some concerns with one of the property owners have brought it to light, and we're concerned about that also. I had talked to Mr. Thorne 2 years ago and explained to him what was going to happen there, because he was new and had bought a property down there behind it, and then again now this last Friday I had a long discussion with him and explained everything, and I think he understands it better. And our closure, I think he was just always wondering what was going on there. You know, it's not been easy filling there. When we first started filling it, there was a lot of water problems, and we were concerned about that. The water building up back, because of the irrigation water had come down through the gravel in there, and we put extensive drain lines in there and continued to drain the water off there. But as the years have gone by, there's no water running in those drain lines anymore, and so I take it to, they said the canal never was leaking, but I think it was. And as they quit irrigating up there, usually in the fall, and that's what would make that 80-foot deep hole fill up there. And so we are in our final closure period with the state, and we'll be, we're about to where all of our topsoil needs to be, except on the far east side. The state still wants some of the that graded differently, and more topsoil over there covering some rocks, and we plan on seeding with native grasses this spring. Our only concern is that we hopefully can retain the water up on the top and keep it from coming down the hillside, and we think we can retain all the water on the property if we get a big storm before our grasses get growing in the spring. So we know this has been an issue, but we've since conception, we started this before, when it was in county, before Temple Metals came. After Temple Metals came, that's when we decided we needed to make sure we had everything going, and that's when we secured our state permit for our landfill. And also we worked with the association there, and we have an agreement with the association to be there, but we worked with them and explained to them, because we found out when we bought the second piece from Steve Alt that there was an easement up there that was supposed to have been a road for that development that was never put through. And so we approached the association, that'd be right in the middle, as you can see on the thing there, and of their easement, and also on the papers I handed to you. And so we approached them and says, you know, we can leave you a big hole over by the 700 North, or do you want to be part of it and we fill it in for you? And well, they were more than happy that we would make that part of our landfill. And so that brought us up to this date. So we look forward to it being closed, and we are bonded with the state to make sure it's closed properly and everything they sign off. And also, American Fork City is part of that process too, because it now lays in Pleasant Grove. American Fork City. So anyway, so with that, I leave you, and thank you for your service, and thank you for the few minutes here tonight. And I truly am envious of your council room here. So take good care of it. If you need to come over and see us,
Question. You say you're going to plant native grasses on that?
yes,
On the whole, basically the whole piece of ground is,
yes,
and then is that the way it will be left? And
that's the way it'll
or
be
is that-
left.
as far as you can see into the future, you don't have plans to develop it at this point?
Okay.
I guess is what I'm asking.
We don't like developers, and so we're not a developer. I'm sorry if I'm offended anybody in here. Over the years, we lost enough money with developers. So anyway, and my brother and I will let it settle out, and our intentions are down the road, because we don't want it go into our future generations that we would probably sell that property. But we have no intention, and we didn't have any intentions of developing that at all. And but you know, someday I'm sure someone will figure out, because there's other landfills in this city that have been built on, and so it takes some work and it takes some money. And if you sit up on the top, as that one picture was, it'd be beautiful lots, but so with big backyards. So any other questions?
I was just going to say, Mayor, when I was in the late 60s, my grandpa, Gar Clark, from over Center Street and First West in Pleasant Grove, I used to get in his dump truck, and we would go to that gravel pit, because he was a sand and gravel and a cement man. And I would sit in that truck while he would fill back up to those hills, and he would fill that with pea gravel while I would sit in the truck, and he would do it with a big scoop shovel. And that's what I've always remembered about that gravel pit, is driving down there with him in his dump truck. I was just a kid, but I'll always have fond memories of that, and my grandpa and I going down there.
So you remember how big a hole it was, don't you?
Absolutely, yeah, absolutely.
So anyway, anything else?
Thanks for your time, Mayor. Appreciate
Okay,
you.
thank you.
Any others present here today? Come forward. Thank you. If you'd again state your name.
My name's Devin Rigby. This is a question directed at the Fugal brothers. I just live north of that property line. Do you plan on doing any surveys of the land to make sure that there's no sinkholes present, just for future home buyers? Any sinkholes that could possibly develop there because of the water that is accumulated there over time?
There's no water there now.
It was put in lifts as we went along, so there's nothing, there are no empty spaces inside that hill.
Okay.
Yeah. It was such granular material, because it was a gravel pit. A lot of the water just dissipated down through it and go away. We don't imagine, I don't think we've had any sinkholes around in Utah.
Yeah, and it's not a prominent thing in Utah, but I just wanted to make sure for, future generations, since I live so close to there, that just, the thought's been put in place to make sure that, the safety of future possible landowners is been thought of. So that's all the comments I have.
Pretty solid mass there.
Thank you, Mr. Rigby. Any others here? I'd like to make public comment. Come forward.
My name is Josh McCabe. I just had 3 comments. First one, I just wanted to thank Councilmember Barnes for voting in favor of the property owner and his trying to sell his land or her land to to Costco. And I just felt bad for that guy or whoever it is that owns that property, and can imagine that would be frustrating. Second, there was a water outage where we live. They had some repair that they had to do. I called just to find out if there was any contamination or anything like that we had to worry about, and we got a notice just 24 hours prior, and there was a tweet that morning or something that said that our water would be out from 9 to 6. And so we just thought that the advisory was really short, and so I asked the guy why they just gave us 24 hours, and he said that's just what they were required to do. So the bare minimum, I guess. They had known about it for 2 or 3 weeks, is what I was told. So that was just an observation. The notice was plastered on the outside of our door, so when we opened it, we couldn't see it. So I went outside and found the notice after I realized that the water was off. So it was kind of inconvenient for everybody in that neighborhood. If they went through the same thing we did, we just couldn't be home that whole day. So, and then third, I was just curious about the minutes. Everything that's posted on the website is pretty outdated. The council meeting stuff is up to date, I think, but all the other committee meetings and all that stuff is pretty. It's from 2016 and 2017. So it'd be interesting to see that information just for transparency and for citizens to stay in the loop.
You're talking like the subcommittee meetings?
Right. So there's a link there in the website that says minutes, and there are some minutes, but they're back from 2016 to 2017. So either the impression is that they're just out of date. If they're not going to be there, that's I guess that's okay. But it'd be nice if there was some information for people just to be involved. And particularly me, this is my second meeting I've been here, and so I'm just interested in learning about how the city's run and how it works. And so, but there's not a lot of resources there for me to do that unless I come to the meeting. And so if somebody else wants to know, they're not going to be able to be in the know. So that's just my comment there. So 3 comments, that's it.
We'll definitely look into that, okay?
Mhm.
And we'll have a New Year's resolution for our subcommittees as well to have accurate minutes and get them to our recorder. That's been a challenge for sure.
Okay.
Like the beautification committee, neighborhood preservation committee, things like that.
Right.
Because our council meetings are pretty up to date.
Right, and I see that you post everything on YouTube. I thought that was pretty good, and
Yeah.
I've seen those. But everything else was just a comment. So.
Thank you.
Are you interested enough to want to fill any of those open seats that are on the committees?
I'm always interested to consider it. So there you go.
Drop us an email.
Okay.
Get lots of seats to fill.
Sure. Thank you.
I think he means it depends on which committee you're talking about.
Yeah.
He's not so dumb.
And let us know what you're interested in, too.
Well, right now. Okay.
Right now.
Yeah. Later. Okay.
Couple of questions,
Sure.
if I may. You said the water was off. What is your address?
I'm on on 100 East, about 400 North. So we're just on a corner lot there.
Okay, since you commented on the 700 North thing, I wondered if you were over that way. Okay. The second question, I guess, is there particular things you've been looking for, particular committee minutes, or are you just in general?
No, just general, just interested in learning. I've
Just
paid
the
a
whole
lot.
thing.
I've paid a lot of attention just personally to more of the national issues, and then quickly realized that there's really nothing I can do there. I could vote, but it really doesn't make a difference. But here I can come and do something and voice my opinion, and you're here. So I think that on that level, I could participate. So
Okay. All right.
okay, thank
Thanks,
you.
Josh.
Just wanted to say we appreciate hearing from the citizens.
Okay. Any others that would like to make public comment at this time?
Just on that note, Mayor, I'd love to see maybe future work session or something like that. I know we've had other issues where we've taped water notices to doors and a windstorm would come and swipe it off and people not being informed. I'm grateful that we're starting to do social media a little bit better, but in our day and age, it'd be interesting to see what we could leverage as far as maybe getting that out ahead of time. I know there's going to be times where you have emergency situations, but for those that are well planned up, I'm not sure if the tape on the door is still the best strategy in today's day and age. And maybe it is combined with something else, but I'd love to maybe see if there's a different process to go through, just because we've had that comment before in the past.
Thank you. Okay, item number 3. If I could just give a little background, the city wishes to recognize members of the community who demonstrate outstanding determination, self-service, and heroic efforts. The Hero Award is something that is kind of new, and we're looking forward to that. And let me just, if I could just say, being a hero does not mean you have to save a life. A hero can be somebody, again, as we described, that just gives something of extraordinary efforts, whether it be a volunteerism to a family, to their community, or whatever it might be. And tonight I'm going to ask our Chief Brims, if he would come forward this time. We have a special award for one member of our community to receive.
Thanks, Mayor and Council. This is an exciting night for us. As you guys know, we see a lot of bad, so I commend you guys for celebrating success stories like this. So we had this plaque made for you guys to hang in this council chambers to recognize individuals. We call them champions or heroes, like Trevor, that we're going to present this award to tonight. But I also want to invite Captain Nilsson and paramedic Jesse McKenna up here to join me with Trevor. They were the paramedic and captain on this call, and he can give you guys a little background on the call. And so, thank you.
Right here. You're right in front of everybody. So let me start by saying I might get a little emotional. So Terry, you're not allowed to tease me afterwards, all right? Okay. I want to tell everybody just a quick story, briefly, touch on a little bit about the day we got to meet Trevor. And it was a morning, and Trevor was home with his 2 baby sisters, and one of their loved ones got real sick, fell real ill, and needed a little bit of extra help that morning. In fact, he became so sick that Trevor and his sister decided they better dial 911. So, being who he is, he told baby sis, hey, go dial 911, let's get some help coming. And as she did that, this great guy here, this brave young man, stepped into action. Warned you. He went over to that loved one who was feeling ill. And due to some of the classes that he's taken, some of the CPR, some of the first aid classes that he learned through the scouting program, which I'm so grateful there's so many scouts here tonight, Trevor knew what to do when that loved one's time in need. And he knew what to step in, kept a calm head to himself, and was able to take care of that loved one and help him out. Those first few minutes of emergency are so crucial and so important. And we do our best to get there, and we do a good job at it. But no matter how fast we drive and how quick we're out the door, we're still a few minutes out. And so the fact that Trevor was able to step in and do what he knew what he needed to do, he really made a difference that day in his loved one's life. So you young men and young scouts, if you ever think to yourself in your first aid classes, I don't need to learn this couldn't be for me, I can guarantee you when Trevor woke up that morning, he had no idea he was going to be doing what he was doing. So pay attention and plan. And look at this great, brave young man right here and the example he set for all of us. Trevor, it was a pleasure to meet you that morning. Thank you.
So Trevor, this is a challenge coin. It has our department badge on it. Our department motto is always ready. So you exemplified that on this, and we encourage you to pass your knowledge on and keep being a championship citizen for us. So thank you so much. Appreciate it. The mayor's gonna take a minute.
All right. Well, I'm glad the minutes won't reflect tears, okay? Because you might get some from your mayor tonight. This is a resolution recognizing Trevor Rigby as an American Fork hero for his diligent and bravery in providing life-saving efforts on his father. Whereas American Fork City wishes to recognize members of the community who demonstrate outstanding determination, selfless service, and heroic efforts, and Whereas on November 30th, 2017, Trevor Rigby performed CPR on his father until emergency personnel arrived. And whereas without those life-saving efforts, his father would have passed away. And whereas Trevor Rigby exemplifies the traits, abilities, and determination that inspire those around him. Now therefore, I, Bradley J. Frost, Mayor of American Fork City, do hereby acknowledge the bravery of Trevor Rigby, affirm him as an American Fork hero, and declare January 23, 2018 to be Trevor Rigby Day in the city of American Fork. In a witness hereof, I hereto set my hand and cause the seal of American Fork to affix this 23rd day of January 2018. Before I can give you this, Trevor, I need the council to make an action. I'm going to call for a vote or a motion.
Mayor, I'll go ahead and I'll move to adopt the resolution declaring January 23rd, 2018 as Trevor Rigby Day. That being said, the Rigbys are phenomenal neighbors and make our neighborhood a lot better place. And as a good note, I'm grateful for Halloween because I always get some fresh homemade donuts at a certain house that are just great. So, anyway.
Thank you for that, Councilman. Seconded by Councilman Shenton. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Okay. Voting was unanimous. Trevor, on behalf of American Fork City, thank you for your service. Thank you.
So while I have the floor, I want to take advantage of this and also publicly thank Captain Nilsson and Paramedic McKenna and the whole fire department. They do a great job, and yeah, it's like I said, we see a lot of bad things, so it's great to celebrate this type of story. And also, I know you guys don't hear it very often or at all, so Mayor and Council and David, I appreciate you guys and the support you give us, because if you guys did not support us, this would not happen. So thank you guys for all of your support as well.
Thank you. All right, I wish we could end this meeting right now, but we do have other business to conduct. We'll go turn to the city administrator report.
I don't have anything at this time, Mayor. Thank you.
Thank you, David. All right, council reports. We'll start with you, Council Member Christiansen.
Okay, the library board, excuse me, the library board met the other day and talked about some things. We have some new members that we will be welcoming now. We still have one more opening. And we've been looking at the budget and what is currently proposed. What we're looking at is a small increase, basically just keeping up with inflation, not extending services. So we hope that you'll be cognizant of that, you know, that we're not asking for very much. So please be kind.
Okay. Thank you. We try. All right, Councilmember Shelton.
Thanks, Mayor. This last week, I had a great opportunity on Thursday night to participate with the scouts that come to the rec center. Edie does a phenomenal job on that. It's just a great opportunity. Probably had 10 or 15 boys that were there, and it was a very engaging conversation. They all prepared with very good questions, and I love how they engage their parents to be more involved and ask good questions too. So really appreciate the invitation, and I know that they kind of share that assignment around, and look forward to hearing other reports that fellow council members have. Also had the opportunity to go to the North Point board meeting yesterday. Yesterday was a meeting full of city council meetings, but had that one for a couple hours in the morning. I found myself elected to the New Era board, so as an alternate, so that's going to be somewhat of a fun task, but it's a board that gets together. It's a Northern Utah Environmental something area board, but basically get together and look for economies of scales. The biggest thing is that Bayview landfill that we bought into last year, and we're going to start seeing those savings come in June of this year, which will be phenomenal. I'm grateful I get to serve with Lynn Walker from Pleasant Grove. He's been a great board member to serve with there as well. 911 dispatch, had a meeting with them. Very interested in seeing what we can try to do to build some redundancies. We heard about the importance of prompt response times, and I think we've identified some gaps that may exist within our system that hopefully we can be able to fix. One of those came down to fiber, and that perked my ears up because that's something that we have a lot of to be able to utilize some way, somehow. So appreciate Mayor. I talked to Mayor Frost, and he's given me the opportunity to work with George and some city staff to see if that's a service we could utilize. So there would be a paging that would go out to the microwave system and then also through a fiber system. That way, if the microwave system went down, we'd have some redundancy built in, which I think would be critical. And then also, while Mayor Fugel's here, I appreciate him. He took some time yesterday to be able to meet with me to see if there's maybe some possibilities of economies of scale, and was very gracious to meet with him with Scott Darrington, and look forward to future discussions there. And then last but not least, had a great meeting with the Chamber and Still Days just prior to this meeting. And so I appreciate their patience with me and working through it. I really value the contributions that the Chamber has made. We kind of reminisced a little bit. I was put on the board about 6 years ago with the Chamber, and there's been a lot of great progress made and a lot of synergies have been created. And so I really appreciate that. That's my report, Mayor.
Thank you, Councilman Shelton. Councilman Barnes, and if you want to give us a report on your last vacation, we'll take it.
I was going to say nothing to report because I literally been out of the country. But then I started to think it's just so great to be back in American Fork. It's good to go away once in a while and see how others live. For those that don't know, we were on a cruise in the Caribbean. If you want details later, I'll be glad to give them to you. But I know most of you don't care. And I understand that, and I appreciate it, but I do now have a cruise line that I would recommend that you do not use. So I think that sums up what the experience was. It's good to be back with you all, and I haven't had any committees meet in the last month or so, so nothing to report.
Right. Thank you, Councilman Barnes. Councilmember Carroll.
Well, as Rob stated, we met with the Still Days as a Still Days committee, and we are attempting to have him download his information to us of the things that we need to do, and that's really all I have to report.
Thank you, Councilmember Taylor.
Nothing to report, Mayor.
Thank you. Mayor's report. I had the privilege of attending a ribbon cutting for a new adoption center that is in American Fork. Just, I guess, I would say it's east of the Olive Garden in that little office complex. And it was a privilege to be there, and I thought what a great purpose they will provide in bridging gaps and bringing families together. And it was very enjoyable. It was the first one as a mayor. But I'm going to take a minute. I really kind of thought about this just because of time's sake, but if you'll oblige me, I would like to go over the state of the city. This is an address that I actually gave to in the chamber meeting, but I think it's become customary in the city that we do this, and I think it's a good tradition. So I'm going to take a minute and just talk about this last year. It's been a little over 2 weeks ago that I took an oath as part of my becoming mayor of American Fork City. As part of my oath, I swore to discharge the duties of my office with fidelity. Fidelity meaning faithfulness is demonstrated by continuing loyalty and support. I gladly accept these terms. In ancient Athens, these terms were codified by an oath that every person had to take to gain citizenship. Among other things, they committed to fight for the ideals and sacred things of the city, and strive unceasingly to quicken the public sense of civic duty. Rather than just giving stats for the State of the City address, I wanted to talk about how we as residents all take an oath, even if it be figuratively, when we gather together in a social contract that is a community. By so doing, we commit to living with and around each other, to share our times, values, and space, and to work together for a collective shared vision of what we want this city to become. Through that lens, I deliver this State of our City address and look at how we did in serving our collective community in 2017. Including myself, there are 6 elected officials that set the vision and policy for the city. We act on behalf of citizens and businesses. We cannot do it alone. We have terrific employees that help us accomplish this. Many of them go above and beyond their regular job duties because they have invested into our community and share those ideals. But staff and elected officials are only part of what make this city run. American Fork has 13 boards, commissions, or committees that help us shape and achieve our goals. In total, that's 80 volunteers who give of their time month after month, year after year, for little to no pay. Why do they do it? Because of their love of American Fork. And these committees do incredible things. Still Days is a huge event that is run by volunteers. They put absurd amount of hours leading up to and during Still Days. The Park Tax Committee is entrusted with reviewing and recommending projects to spend sales tax money on. With their help, the city has invested almost $2 million back into the community, funding plays and performances, adding play bathrooms, pavilions, and parking to many existing parks, and creating entirely new parks. Then there's the Planning Commission, who work as hard as anyone else for the benefit of the city. The single largest topic the City Council deals with on a regular basis is growth and development. And virtually all items dealing with growth and development are vetted first by our Planning Commission. They shoulder a great responsibility to look after the future of our city through a careful review and wise recommendations. As mayor and council, we trust and respect them and are grateful for their service. We have great volunteers that serve and in a very tangible way further the ideals of our community. I feel there are 3 cogs in the machine that keep our community operating. One are the people, the other is the government those people set up, and the final cog are our businesses. American Fork has over 1,500 businesses that are terrific partners in the community, each dedicated to making this a better place. I'm always impressed by the support these businesses offer each other as well as the residents. And by supporting, I just don't mean great customer service. I mean actual service. They facilitate donations, volunteering, gifts, and networking. Organizations like Tabitha's Way is a great example of many businesses in American Fork, and a metaphor for how we should all be. While Tabitha's Way is located in American Fork, their service goes far beyond our borders. For them, it's not a matter of who belongs and who doesn't. It's a matter of who is in need and who can help. These are the testimonies that show how our business don't just work in our community, they are part of our community. Our police and fire do much for us. Last year, our police had almost 30,000 service calls, made 233 felony arrests, and averaged 1,252 open investigations. Similarly, our fire and rescue handled 2,895 calls for service, which is just under Lehigh, who is double our population. These brave men and women have taken an oath to protect and to serve. That is their job. But their love of that job and the community has driven them to do much more than what is required. Last year, our police decided to do something about the growing numbers of domestic violence. They assigned one investigator full-time to domestic violence and began offering public education programs to the community. In fact, I personally worked closely with our police in Utah County to put together a regional hall town meeting to educate people on the issues and connect those in need to available resources. Our police are often the first call on incidents, but they remain involved, often meeting with many other agencies along the way to ensure the best outcome of each domestic violence case. In an effort to be proactive, our police and fire department started a program where they have equipped and trained our police officer who are typically first on scene to use Narcan, a drug that can save the lives of those succumbing to drug overdose. In another example of doing more, our fire department has begun to train with our police department so they can provide life-saving services to injured people during an active shooter situation rather than waiting until after it's safe to go in and triage. Our employees enjoy lower insurance costs. Our residents enjoy lower insurance costs, thanks in part to the responsiveness to our fire department. Our police chief has taken an active role in the legislature that impacts public safety and now sits on a policy-making board at the Capitol. Finally, our fire department working towards certifying all city employees to be CPR ready. This will dramatically increase our ability to respond in an emergency. The point is, these actions show how our community is in good hands, with police and fire department who act actively rather than reactively serve and protect all of us. Mayor Hatfield would always say the only constant in life is change. I believe that he was trying to help us understand that our city is growing, and we will continue to grow. Right now, our city is about 10 square miles, roughly 75% built out, with a population of about 30,000 residents. By the time we are fully built out, we expect to double in population and increase geographically to 13 square miles. We live in a great town with great people, but it is myopic to think that the only way to keep it great is to not change it. Closing the doors and the borders will cut us off from the better things to come. We need to think higher than that and realize that if we work together to be strong, unified, and involved community, then we will maintain our identity as growth occurs. In fact, our identity will be transmitted to all who come in. If we can't avoid change, we need to embrace it and to direct it. I want growth to work for us. Growth should increase our access to resources and amenities and open up new channels for transportation while still giving us a sense of community and oneness. I think it's key to not stifle development, but not be caught off guard by it either. The south side of our city is a perfect example of how we need to be smart about growth. With the Front Runner Station next to so much undeveloped land, we know development is going to happen eventually. UDOT knows this as well. That is why we are considering routes for major transportation corridors south of I-15. In an effort to set our own destiny, we as a city have master planned an area in order to provide a framework for growth while still allowing flexibility based on stakeholders' input. We want as much input as possible so we can accurately assess what the best interest is for the city as a whole. If we aren't proactive, the impending development will leave the area with congestion similar to that at Thanksgiving Point. In closing, in setting this, in settings like this, I can only touch on a few groups to make my point, but I think these groups are representative of the larger whole. And while every resident of American Fork doesn't take an oath to fight for the ideals and sacred things of the city, our actions have shown that maybe we are not so different from the people of Athens. In many ways, we showed in 2017 that we have worked together to do something more for the community we love. And because of that, we can echo the Athens long ago in the final line of their oath. And I'm quoting, "Thus, in all these ways, we will transmit this city not only, not less, but greater and more beautiful than it was transmitted to us." Thank you very much. That is the mayor's report for tonight. We'll now move on to the common consent agenda. We have two items, approval of minutes from January 2nd, 2018, a special session, and approval of the January 9th, 2018 city council minutes. Is there any changes to these minutes as they have been reviewed? Thank you for that motion, Councilman Tater. Do I have a second?
I'll second.
Thank you for a second by Councilman Shelton. Any discussion on this motion? Hearing none, I'll call for a roll call vote. I can find my sheet here. All right. Councilmember Christiansen?
Aye.
Councilmember Shelton?
Aye.
Councilmember Barnes?
Aye.
Councilmember Carroll?
Aye.
Councilmember Tater?
Aye.
Thank you. Action items. First up is the ratification of city payments from January 3rd, 2018 to January 16th, 2018, and approval of purchase requests over $25,000. Any questions? If not, I'll entertain a motion.
Mayor, I move that we approve the purchase request over $25,000 and ratify the city payments.
Thank you for that motion, Councilman Carroll. Do I have a second? Second. Seconded by Councilman Tater. Any discussion on the motion? Hearing none, I'll call for a roll call vote. Councilman Member Christiansen.
Aye.
Councilmember Shelton.
Aye.
Councilmember Barnes.
Aye.
Councilmember Carroll.
Aye.
Councilmember Tater.
Aye.
Thank you. Motion carries. As stated in the State of the City, we have some board and commission vacancies to fill. Currently before us, we have two from the Planning Commission, and I'd ask him to stand. John Woffington to be once again appointed to serve through a term of 2024. He told me that by then he would be an old man, so I don't know what to mean by that. And then Jeff DuPay to serve as an alternate for the term of 1 year that'll end in 2019, if he would remain standing. And then on our library board, Ann Long, if she would stand, please, to serve until 2021, and David King. You hear David? There's David in the back. To serve likewise until 2021. I would entertain a motion to appoint these great men and women.
I move to approve the appointments as presented.
Thank you for that motion. Councilmember Christiansen, do I have a second?
I second.
Second by Councilmember Carroll. Any discussion? Hearing none, I'll call for a roll call vote. Councilmember Christiansen?
Aye.
Councilmember Shelton?
Aye, and thank you for your service.
Councilmember Barnes?
I was just going to ask one of them to smile, but he just did. So make sure he was happy with it.
I know you can't be quiet, Kevin.
I didn't say who it was. Aye.
I know what you're doing. Councilmember Carroll?
Aye.
Councilmember Taylor? Aye. Thank you. Voting is 100% unanimous. Thank you very much. Thank you. And we'll put you to work, or keep you to work, whatever it might be. All right. Okay, item number 3 is a review and action on a resolution establishing the continuity in government in American Fork City. This is done annually. And as I was reading through it, if the mayor is absent, and then they defined it as not physically present nor able to communicate within 48 hours. And the only way that would be is if I went with Councilmember Barnes on a cruise.
I was going to say, if you come on a cruise, we'll have you absent for more than 48 hours.
So, but as stated in this resolution, in succession would be Mayor Pro Tem Clark Taylor, Councilmember Robert Shelton, and Councilmember Kevin Barnes. I'd entertain a motion on the continuity of government.
I move to adopt the resolution establishing the continuity in government in American Fork City. And I'm happy my name is not on that list.
Thank you for that motion, Councilman Carroll. Do I have a second? Seconded by Councilmember Taylor. Any discussion on this motion? Hearing none.
No, Mayor, I actually found it very interesting that you didn't have to be mentally there. You only had to be physically there. So,
I didn't read through the fine print. I'm sure it's there, right, Casey? Okay. All right. Well, I'll do my best. So, and that's subject to interpretation, I'm sure. All right. So we're moving on to a vote. Councilmember Christiansen.
Aye.
Councilmember Shelton.
Aye.
Councilmember Barnes.
Aye.
Councilmember Carroll.
Aye.
Councilmember Taylor.
Aye.
Thank you. Motion passes again unanimously. Item number 4 is a review and action on a resolution adopting a no-fault culinary water pressurized irrigation, sanitary sewer, and stormwater failure claims program. This was a work session item, and talking with staff, I was not available for that work session. I was actually out of town, but I've reviewed this, been told by staff, felt like some of the things were brought up have been that were changed in the language. Does the council have any questions, concerns concerning this?
I just have a question. I was there at the work session. I was able to be there. But I just, if there's anybody that could tell me how, this isn't insurance, right? This is just setting up a system for people to make claims through the city. Am I understanding that correct? So where does insurance fit in this process? What?
We've learned by sad experience it doesn't. So that's why we're setting this up. So my understanding is we're going to set aside in the budget a pot of money each year, and that pot of money is to be used in case line breaks and insurance doesn't cover. And when that money's exhausted, we're done at that point. So we're capped as far as the limit of liability is my understanding. So unfortunately, with the exclusions of various policies out there and with our past experience, insurance would be too expensive, is my understanding, to pick up on this from what our agent represented.
So generally, a homeowner's policy will not cover groundwater that comes from outside the home. Burst pipes inside the home and stuff like that are covered, but this is outside water that really, in a sense, comes from the city or some part of the city, and that's why I think we feel there's some responsibility and feel that we owe the citizens something, but it's not a blank check. But we're also not trying to be an insurance company. I hope everybody understands that.
Yeah.
So to be clear, this is a no-fault policy. So in the event that the city, there is an incident that happens and it involves the city, and our insurance company comes and deems the city not responsible, not negligent for that, and they won't cover that, then this would be the payment that the city agrees that we will help augment repair efforts. Now, if it is that the city is at fault and our insurance company says, yep, that's on the city, then our insurance company actually will cover that part. So
It was unique this last year as we had 3 different line breaks, and each of those times I had neighbors in that area that I had lived in those neighborhoods, and they'd contacted me. And I think I mentioned it in the work session. I feel comfortable passing this, but I hope that there'd be a way of coming back and presenting to the council the process that this is going to take. Many of them are very frustrated. I think the reason they were frustrated is we didn't have a process. We didn't know what was going to happen, but I sat down with a lot of them and had a good conversation about what we could do to improve it. I think it's great to have the designated person, but I think city staff needs to know who that designated person is, and they've got to know the cue card of what not to say and what to say during those circumstances. So I'd love to just see a process come back and say, hey, this is how we're going to make sure this is implemented. So that's my only suggestion.
Yeah, and you can see in the proposal here that point person will be the Public Works Director. Most of the incidences that we have involve Public Works to some level, and so it makes sense that Public Works directly involved in that. Or a designee if that Public Works Director is out of town or unavailable. As he leaves town, he will say, hey, this person is in charge. You know, it might be the water superintendent or someone along those lines, and say, okay, this will be the point person for contact if we have an incident.
Any other questions? If not, I would entertain a motion on this item.
I move to approve the resolution adopting a no-fault culinary water pressurized irrigation, sanitary sewer, and stormwater sewer failure claims program.
Thank you for that motion, Councilmember Carroll. Do I have a second? Seconded by Councilmember Barnes. Any discussion on the motion?
There is one word that's missing, I believe, in the qualification for assistance, Part E. I'll give you a chance to get to that. The city may pay at their discretion the deductible up to the level private insurance. Should be level of private insurance.
All right, that's the value of having a journalist on the. All right, would you accept that provision in your motion in a second? I do. Okay. All right. We have a motion and a second. I'm going to go for a roll call vote. Councilmember Christiansen.
Aye.
Councilmember Shelton.
Aye.
Councilmember Barnes.
Aye.
Councilmember Carroll.
Aye.
Councilmember Taylor.
Aye.
Thank you. Motion carries. Item number 5 is review and action on approval of the COPS grants awarded by to American Fork Police Department. I'm going to have Chief here come up and maybe just give us a little explanation.
Mayor Frost and members of the council, I appreciate the opportunity to have a chance to talk to you a little bit about this grant. It's an important accomplishment for American Fork for a couple of reasons. First off, this was a pretty highly competitive grant process where only 16% of the agencies nationwide that applied were successful. Also, as far as the state of Utah goes, where because of our demographics it's a little more difficult still, only 3 agencies in the state of Utah were successful. So the other thing that makes this important for our agency is we have tried really hard to build our relationships with our citizens and to implement community policing, which is a large part of the scoring mechanism used to obtain this grant. So it kind of validates the efforts we've made. And then the biggest thing also is it gives us a good component to help keep our junior high school kids safe, which is where this officer will be assigned. So this particular grant will pay $125,000 to the city of American Fork over the course of 3, and now because we're implementing it mid-budget year, will actually carry over into the 4th year. But what that does is it pays wages and benefits. So we've also been negotiating with the school district, and based upon what they're willing to contribute to this in the grant, over the course of the 3 years, it will have no cost to the city for the cost of the personnel. So this form that's up here on the screen is meant to represent the 3 years, but I do want to make sure that I'm clear that it will carry over another $23,000 into the 4th year because we're implementing it in January. So I don't know if that leaves you with any questions, but
Just out of curiosity, Chief, will that agreement with the school district continue throughout as long as there's an SRO there, or are we just going on a 3-year term here and see how it plays out?
Currently, right now, what they have indicated is they intend to compensate that to all law enforcement agencies with an SRO for the foreseeable future.
Okay.
So short of something changing, yes, we foresee that would continue.
I just mostly wanted to say that I really am impressed that you're able to get these grants, because from conversations we've had together, I mean, you're chronically underfunded because there's only so much to go around, and you have to be very creative with coming up with solutions, and this is one of those creative ways. And I think that everybody should know how much work you are doing to get what you need for the police department, and it's not coming all just straight from the city. I was also wondering if you could kind of explain, is this a new person that you will be hiring? And I think it said in here that it needed to be 4 years, and what would happen the 4th year?
The 4th year, like I said, would carry over because we're implementing in January instead of the beginning of the budget year. It would cover $23,814 into the 4th year. So this grant is required to either rehire somebody that was laid off or to hire a new position. So in this particular case, this would be hiring a new position for the junior high school.
Well, I have junior high school students, so I especially appreciate this. They go to American Fork Junior High.
Is this something we can apply for again in the future, every 3 years kind of a thing?
They offer this as long as Congress doesn't change. It's offered every year. So we'll roll the dice every year and hope we become successful, but there again,
But who knows?
It's
But
highly
it is,
competitive.
That's kind of the intent, is to keep applying for it.
Yes,
Good.
sir.
I think it's great. I congratulate you and all of the officers. Has been said several times tonight. We're grateful for the men in blue and men and women in blue, and the ones in white also, as well as their blues. And we're just grateful for all of them do for our city. And this is just indicative of that. And this will obviously benefit Councilman Carroll, not my children, but grandchildren. So it's really good to see it impact the local community, and that's great.
Thanks.
I just want to say, Chief, that I don't think these things happen by accident. I don't think the community behavior, I don't think the fact that us being able to put together all of the necessary elements are just good fortune. I've lived here most of my life. I remember Boyd Adams as a little kid and how we were treated when we came to the police department, Paul Durant. I've seen both good and bad, and you were bringing in an awful lot of good, and you were restoring what maybe many had thought maybe would not come back. And those relationships and those things build, you are great stewards of this community, probably more so than you even realize. And you should be applauded for what's happened, even in your short tenure, what has happened. I know you've been with the force forever, and what you've done is no accident, and that rests on your shoulders and on your great team. So you should know that we appreciate it.
Thank you.
Mayor, I'll make a motion to approve the COPS grant as rewarded to the American Fork Police Department, awarding federal funds over a 3-year period for $125,000. Authorize the police department to secure the vehicle and necessary equipment for the additional officer.
Thank you for that motion, Councilman Shelton. Do I have a second?
I'll second.
All right. Any discussion? Hearing none, I'll call for a roll call vote. Councilman Christiansen?
Aye.
Councilman Shelton?
Aye.
Councilman Barnes?
Aye.
Councilman Carroll?
Aye.
Councilman Taylor?
Aye.
Thank you. Number 6 on the agenda is a review and action on an ordinance amending Chapter 12.29 of the City Code, 10.29 of the City Code regarding fire lane parking restrictions, something we had come up in council in the work session, excuse me. Any questions?
Mayor, I move to approve the ordinance amending Chapter 10.29 of the City Code regarding fire lane parking restrictions.
Thanks for that
Second.
motion, Councilman Carroll, seconded by Council
Couldn't
Member
get one.
Christiansen. She snuck it in. All right, any questions? If not, we'll call for a vote.
I would just comment and hope that we take an active role in enforcing this, not just lip syncing it tonight, but when we pass ordinances like this, it's for a reason. And I realize we've got lots of other demands on the police officers and other things, but it does no good if we don't enforce it. So I would encourage enforcement. Even if it's one of my family members in the red zone, get after them.
Okay. All right, we'll have a roll call vote. Councilmember Christiansen.
Aye.
Councilmember Shelton.
Aye.
Councilmember Barnes.
Aye.
Councilmember Carroll.
Aye.
Councilmember Tater. All right, number 7, review and action on an agreement with the American Fork Chamber of Commerce for the upcoming Steel Days celebration and concert in the park. And that information was in your packet. I asked David to take the lead here if we have any questions, and we have members of the chamber that are here as well. It's worth noting that this is a 1-year contract. We feel like it's kind of a leap of faith on both our parts. We're kind of changing the chemistry a little bit of Steel Days, but I felt comfortable all along knowing who we're looking across the table at and what they've done for us in the past. But open to any questions and that we might be able to resolve anything that's unresolved in our minds here tonight to pass this.
If you all wanted to go through, if that's
Yep.
okay, Brett or Mayor. 1.1 there, and I had a chance to talk, mentioned beforehand. So guys, feel free to pipe in at any moment. And wanted to just note that chamber fees is will include the following events. My concerns with the word "will" there. That means that they will do those events. As a committee, as we looked at last year, we were looking to strike item F, the youth dance. That's been having extremely low attendance. We've tried a few different things, but I didn't want them to have to put on an event that would cost money if it didn't make sense for them as they continue to do it. So I didn't know if we need to change that word "will" to "may" include the following. I definitely think there are events on here we want to have for sure,
Yeah.
but if there is an event on there. Item G, I think it'd just be nice to put the beautification committee in there. That's usually who's been over the garden tours, and now that I have that responsibility, I'm sure they would want to represent that, and I'm sure that's okay with the chamber as well.
You'll need them. They
Yeah.
know where all the good yards are. Yeah.
And
Councilman Shelton, just to clarify on that.
Yeah.
So you would want it to read on G that it would, as the other ones, that it would say garden tours, and then in parentheses, in coordination with
Yeah.
the beautification committee.
I don't think it's huge, but I just thought it'd be nice to be able to recognize them. That's going to be who they're coordinating with. Item 1.3, as we go there, it talks about chamber agrees it will include in its marketing of Steel Days the following events. It talks about the car show and cruise and the Steel Days 5K races. There's some revenue generated from that, and I think it's important to note who collects that revenue. And I think the intention is for that to go to the chamber, and so I think we need to clarify that a little bit, that the revenues from there, or they're going to enter into contractual arrangements, I would assume, with those entities, and they would collect those funds.
Councilman Shelton, I'm agreeing with everything you're saying here, and but I want you to prepare yourself with a motion to kind of clean this up a little bit.
And Mayor, just addressing that, the understanding is, at least my understanding in preparing the contract is that all the revenue would be collected by the
Correct.
chamber.
Exactly.
Yeah, that not just limited to those events, but everything would go
Correct.
to theirs.
And I wanted to make that clear. It goes on, and I'll get to it later. And the reason I mention that here is because it gets down to the indemnification area, and we'll talk a little bit more about that and why I feel maybe that's an important clarification there. last two sentences there on that same page, it says, furthermore, if the chamber determines it can operate these events more efficiently and successfully than the other organization, chamber reserves the right to organize and operate these events. I think that's great. I think competition is good and healthy. The only concern I had there is that I've worked in good faith and kept, I think, Mayor Frost and Councilman Barnes abreast of the negotiations I was in last year. One of my concerns, I'll just be very open in the public forum here, is, we had the Fun Run was asking for a 10-year contract. And we told them, no, not 10 years, but do a good job this year, and we'll be willing to look at a longer-term contract. We were halfway through negotiations there, so I don't know if we could change that perhaps they would put an RFP in for those events and make it a little more competitive. But I would hate for someone that's been working good with the city to all of a sudden be on the outs, working in good faith. I know Blaine Thompson has done a great job with that car show every year, and I'm not accusing the chamber of having any ulterior motive there, but I read this to be a 6-year contract, and so we'll get to that when we get to the automatic renewal period. I just thought during that 6-year period of time, if there's a reason to readdress that, some kind of a bidding process. And that may not be the best idea in the world, but that was the only concern that I had.
When you say 6-year contract, you meaning with the run?
No, this agreement here before says a 6-year contract. So we can get to that here at the very end.
Okay.
And then as we take a look on the next page there, I think it's just important as we look at it. It says chamber is also responsible for planning, scheduling, operating the concerts and the park series. I didn't know if we also need to make sure that it noted that they were also fiscally responsible for it. I didn't know if fiscally was contained in that operating, or if we need to specify that. That was the question that I had.
And my response to that would be the same on the revenue, actually. The understanding is they're responsible for all the expenses and they get all the revenue.
Okay. Other than the fireworks, right?
Correct. Which have been specifically excluded.
Right. And then it comes down here and it talks about in section 1.7, it mentioned the chamber responsibility for above events include but not limited to the following. And it talks about them being involved. I just thought it would be interesting to clean that up if it also includes sections in 1.3 or just sections 1.1. So if we're going to outsource the race and the car show, does that mean that the chamber is going to be hitting them up for timelines and things of that nature? Not so big on that. I just didn't know if it needed some clarification on it. Item 1.8, we just need to correct the domain name for the Still Days website. It's stilldaysaf.com. I assume that's what the chamber would want to continue to use because we don't have the stilldays.com domain. Item 3.1, I thought it'd be good to specify which fiscal year that 20,000 is coming out of and when. That way it's very clear which budget year we're coming out of. I assume that would be here pretty soon to give them some operating capital to start out, but I think that maybe that would be good to say that it would be in the fiscal year of 2018 that 20,000 would come out. Again, being that it is in my view, a multi-year contract. I think we hit most of that I cleaned up there. I just had a concern for the chamber. I don't know, Kyle, is it possible that we could figure out the overtime for them? I'm just worried that, they're going to say they're going to be responsible for the overtime, and I know they've got to be able to get permission for overtime and things of that nature, but we've never really accurately tracked that. And so I didn't know if there was a way to go back and look at the pay stubs and see how that would function.
I spoke with Chief Alsliff this year. They were tracking some of the hours, but unfortunately, he was the only one that had been tracking the hours separately, so the other department heads hadn't. So there isn't an easy way to go back. We could make some estimates, but I can't guarantee how accurate those figures would be.
Sure, and I think maybe some estimates would be helpful as they're looking at cost projections and things of that nature. I just would feel bad going into a contract not knowing, and hopefully it's minimal as our assumption is, but that wasn't a big issue. It's something that I was just trying to see if it would be helpful for the chamber to
I could certainly reach out to the department heads and try to come up with some cost estimates if that would help.
Is there a not to exceed amount in this though for overtime? 12.5? What was that?
So I think the original proposal had a not to exceed number. However, in discussing this with Casey and trying to work through what that number was going to be, we took the 12,000 from the budget that was presented to the council before for the overtime hours for the police, and we knew that came off that budget just for police, but not for public works. And so in this, we didn't have exact numbers for public works, and in addition to that, the chamber may decide to use labor differently. The intention is possibly using more volunteers and maybe even having city employees volunteer time as well, so that we can bring that overtime number down. And because we didn't have that exact amount, then we said, hey, we're going to work with the committee to approve any overtime that happens, so that the committee knows up front what that's going to be, and that they know that it will be 12,000 approximately for the police, and that we will make sure we communicate on any other overtime hours. So.
The other one that I had was section 4.1. In the middle there, it talks about the indemnification, and it basically says that the city's going to take all the liability in section 1.3, but we're giving all the revenue to the chamber, and I didn't think that was a very fair deal. If you're going to get the revenue, you ought to pick up, and the planning of the events, you ought to pick up the liability associated with that, and that's referring back to the car show and to the 5K events that would be there. I still think 1.5 would be a good, and then I don't know if we want to indemnify on the concert in the park series again. That's just something that we're not having any control over. We're giving that all to the chamber and giving them the opportunities for the revenue. So
I read that differently, Councilman Shelton. It's my understanding that the chamber's actually taking liability for everything except for the fireworks.
So I think it says here, negligent fault of the chamber or neglect of any employer, contractor, planning agreement.
Where are you reading? Sorry.
I'm sorry, middle of 4.1 here. Chamber shall defend, indemnify, and save harmless the city and its officers. And you get through all of that language, and then you have a comma about midway there. It says 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 lines down, and then you have the word excluding those identified in subsection 1.3, 1.5, and the concerts in the park. So my understanding, and you can clarify me, correct me here, Casey, but it looks as if they're indemnifying us, and we've got this, hold harmless except for those events.
Well, those events would have they've also got the insurance policy there, and so there would also be some liability associated with those events. Responsibility for liability with those events by the entities that are putting them on. And I can let the chamber speak to that if they've got a different idea on it.
But if we're not entering into those contracts and we're giving all that control to...
But we're not accepting liability. They're just not indemnifying us for it.
Well, I guess if I'm not being indemnified and they're using our facilities, I would assume that is accepting liability, but that's how I interpret it.
Yeah.
So if there was an event that took place and something happened at Robinson Park with the car show, we would not be indemnified by the chamber.
Well, they're not necessarily running that event, so no, they wouldn't indemnify us, but there would have to, in order for us to be liable, we would have to have some negligence or something that would make us liable as a city.
Okay, so I'll go back to section 1.7 where it says the chamber is responsible for the above events including, and it goes through in details that they're going to be planning it, organizing it, and doing everything. So I think there's a contradiction in my mind there where we're saying, hey, here's all the events that you're going to be responsible for, including section 1.3, but then we're not picking up the waiver there.
Well, and I'll let the chamber speak to that, and maybe they've got a response, because if, obviously from the city's perspective, I'm okay with them accepting all responsibility.
Yeah, we've had a discussion, and we're fine with taking 1.3 off of the language there, that we are held liable for those two events, the car show and the 5K.
And
so, are you saying striking 1.3?
Just the exclusion
Just
provision, I think, Mayor.
Okay.
And I think 1.5 is great. I can see the fireworks side of it, and we're still paying for that, and our fire department's maintaining that. But where we didn't have any control of the other events, and again, they're going to be contracting, I assume, directly or holding those events directly by themselves. Anyway.
That's fine.
Jump down here to term of the agreement, and this is where I think it turns into a 6-year contract in my mind, but I am no attorney. 5.1 says the term of this agreement shall commence on the date of the agreement executed and shall be in effect for 1 year from the date of execution by both parties, provided, however, this agreement shall automatically renew upon termination date for 5 additional 1-year periods and upon the same conditions and terms stated therein, so long the city appropriates funds necessary to meet its obligations. It goes on to say that the automatic renewal will stay in effect unless there's a 3-month disclosure of not wanting to renew. Having that meeting with the chamber, I think we came up with some different language. You guys also had some concerns that, jumping out in April would not be a good thing for still days if we're putting it on in July. So maybe lengthening that to the year prior, December 31st prior. That would give us a good 6 or 7 months to be able to put that on. So I think that would be helpful.
Let me just comment on that, and of course, you guys can contract whatever the parties agree to do, but the way that it reads is not 3 months from the event, but 3 months from the contract date. That there needs 3 months prior to the anniversary of the contract date, you got to say whether you're in or out at that point.
So that would go back to, assuming we do this tonight, we're looking back into October.
October. Yeah.
My math right on that?
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you for that clarification, Casey. And then I just wrote some notes that maybe some considerations that we may want to look to add to it. In the years past, I had a steep learning curve and learned quite a bit. My first year, we had the State Tax Commission come after us, wondering where our special permit was at, and some tap dancing and some promising that would never happen again. Got them, appeased them, but I think that we need to put that in there, that any type of permitting, it'd be the responsibility of the chamber. So that'd be your group gathering permits, your permits with UDOT to be able to close the road. I just think it's clear, it'd be good to clarify who's going to do all of that process. And then I think the only permit that they wouldn't be responsible for would be the fireworks permit, which we would do through our fire department as we normally have done. The other one that I had talked about is the collection and payment of any sales tax would need to be done through the chamber's administration with that special permitting process. And then I just thought this interesting because I ran into this issue with the carnival right now. We were supposed to, by contract, and did you get a chance to look at that at all, Casey?
No, but I had some thoughts on it, and it's probably not anything that's necessarily related to this contract because I'm not sure that your analysis was correct, but I'd like to talk to you offline where we're dealing with a third party that's not here.
Okay. So one of my questions was who's going to decide the dates of still days going forward, and that's always been done by the carnival, and that's really been a heartache. And I know that the police department and others have approached me and said, hey, it's really hard when you do it the week of the 4th of July because that means no extra holidays or being able to take in and things of that nature. And where we are involved heavily, I think we need to spell out who's going to set those dates and contracts and things of that nature if we're looking 6 years out. If that needs to be agreed upon with the city a year ahead of time, or if we do it like we do with the carnival. Part of the agreement with the carnival is that it had in there the last 2 years we had to agree on dates. When I was negotiating with them, we couldn't come to an agreement because they keep pushing us right into the 4th of July week, which creates a lot of problems for us, especially when that 4th of July rotates towards a weekend, and then we get pushed to have to hold it during that period of time. So just an item of concern I've seen over the last few years that I've been associated with it. And then I think as we look at the permitting for the parade, they mentioned they'll get all the waivers and retain those. I think that's important to note, just with the liability. Casey, we had a conversation from request from Mayor Hadfield looking at liability, and that's one that we thought was a significant liability. And then I think it's important to put in here the date the magazine will be printed and mailed each year. Sometimes we've run right up to the deadline, and it's hard coordinating all those things. but I think that'd be helpful if we did it by the first week in June. That way we get to publish our concerts in the park. And I think that went out really well this year to give people time versus 2 or 3 days before getting it in the mail. And then is our Parks and Recreation Department here? So we ran into this problem a little bit. We found out that we needed to reserve Quail Cove Park by the November of the previous year. And I didn't know if we needed to put that in here. That way they're aware of what they need to do to reserve the parks to make sure that we're not competing. I ran into that and took a good looking verbally for not being aware of that policy. And then I believe for the carnival tickets, that's going to all be run through. Remind me, Josh, who did we agree that was? Was that the city still?
That we wouldn't change what we've been doing on sales of tickets.
So the
City will not be
administration selling the tickets would still fall under the city to be able to do that then.
So people are going to come to the city, obviously, to buy some tickets. So we would coordinate with the city in those sales, but the chamber would ultimately be responsible for the collection of those revenues as well as the expense involved with the city of Fun.
So what we usually do is we have one person in the city that goes out and contacts all the businesses and makes sure. So we'd still keep that same process.
Well, we would have an individual, not necessarily the city person, but coordinate with all of the businesses. Yeah.
Okay.
I think that you can maximize that maybe in a little bit better way as well with the contacts of the chamber.
Yeah, we have a few businesses that have asked about being able to help out on sales.
So I'm just curious on this, Rob. You have a lot of points there. Because I'm the dimmest bulb on the council, maybe we put more language in 1.2, because when I read that the chamber agrees to plan and operate, I think permits, I think all of those different things, and I have no need, because I don't love to read line after line of the redundancies. Can we state what planning and coordinating entails so that we don't have to have this back over? And it would be, in my mind, I don't want to tell you when to put your magazine out. You're in this to make money. You're going to know what you do best. I'm not going to sell you a business and then tell you how to run it. I'm going to cooperate with you. I'm going to help all I can. But I'm just wondering if we need all of that language short of, I agree, very much agree with the dates. That should be coordinated with the city. But the whole reason this is appealing to me is because I've been in the Still Days boat for 2 years before. I know how difficult it has become and is. And so it seems like turning this over to you is exactly what my intent to do is to turn it over to you. And by doing that, those permits, that liability, all of those things becomes yours, and I don't need the line item. Is that out of the question?
No, we can do it that way if you want to do it that way. I'll follow the direction of the council on that. We can put in on, as far as planning, we can say what will include obtaining permits, setting timelines, and all other tasks associated with planning and operating.
Yeah, I think those elements that you had, Rob, we could enclose in that 1.2 and then maybe do away with once we take out 1.3 and the other explanation. But I mean, I think choosing the date is incumbent upon the city to be able to coordinate with you for that because of staff and everything else. But short of that, man, I want to give this to you and say,
and that would fall on council member Carol, being part of that Still Days committee as well as an appointed staff member, so that we would have that constant communication with the city.
I don't know why you wouldn't want to in the first place. So, I mean, does this help solve the number of changes? I think also the comment that Rob made about May is very good, because I think some of these are great, some of them are tradition, and you guys are going to have to make that call.
And the only question, and Councilman Clark, just Taylor.
Actually go by either.
Sir, Council Member, sir. And that's fine to go with will or may, but if you go with may, then the chamber really has bought the business, and they can decide to do none of the events and go with their own, or do them all. And so,
May in conjunction or may in coordination with the city liaison or whatever that might be, so they just don't have a carte blanche. But again, we're forming a partnership with people that we expect are going to act in our very best interest. And so, you know, I just know that some of these, having chaperoned the youth dance, you know, Jeff Shorter and I stood around and talked for 2.5 hours, and we watched maybe 25 kids. And Craig, we could have taught them some dances with kids. So some of those things I think we
might bring you back to do a dance class.
Some of those things I think we need to be able to say. Not necessarily a good one, but as long as the chamber is working in conjunction with the city for those kind of things to determine, maybe that's what we say in that particular sense. I think we'll be fine. I just think we can make this easier to digest and have it still make every bit the amount of sense that we need it to.
Are you suggesting some wording in your 1.2 that would say something like including but not limited to, and then specifically list?
That would be 1.1.
Or
yeah.
whichever way you put it, including but not limited to, so that there's some wiggle room for some of those.
Rob's suggestion of may, and then, you know, may include but are not limited to, something like that. And then 1.2, I would put the full description of what we believe to plan and operate means. And then I would pull 1.3 from 4, I don't remember where that was. It just seems like that would make this much easier. And well, that's my thought.
The other thing I forgot to mention, I apologize, under that list, and that's why I think the discretion's there. For 2 years I was over Still Days, and I never knew there was a Still Days golf tournament. Can you believe that? And it operated out completely outside of it. We never advertised for it, and I felt really bad last year during the week of Still Days when I found out that there was a golf tournament, because they didn't get any support from the city, and it's our golf course. And so I mentioned that to the chamber and see if we couldn't try to coordinate that a little bit for next year. They didn't ask for any money, and they didn't receive any additional city money, but that's why I think it would be good to add maybe some discretion in there.
I know who's working on the golf course committee, and I could ask him.
I've heard he can be sometimes a very wise man.
Well, there lies in another revenue source. It's a good tournament. So
I have one comment. I'm a little hung up on the discussion that we've had about overtime pay, because they mentioned that only one department, this is only one department's overtime pay. So I'm a little worried about you guys creating your financial profile off of this, and can you respond to that? Would you feel okay with it how it is, or?
I think going to David's point about working closely with city staff to manage those hours, I think that there are some opportunities for volunteers to be able to handle some of those things. But again, as we go through the budget and we look at it and we say, all right, we really do need to cover these hours, then through the finances, and Ryan kind of handles the finances of all of this, but we would say, all right, well, we're going to need to approve an additional $5,000 in expenditures, and that would have to come on the committee, but that's something that we're willing to tackle.
It does say the city and chamber will negotiate who is responsible to pay for additional overtime, and that does leave it a little open-ended to leave us on the hook or you on the hook when we don't know. Is that a valid concern?
I think it is, and the fact that we're talking about it before then, I think is critical. I think we have to have things in place for that, because as appealing as that sounds, a city worker knowing that another city worker is getting paid and that city worker is being asked to volunteer is going to not probably go over very well. At least I wouldn't think it would. But
And up in the statement here, probably third line down, it says to qualify for reimbursement, the chamber must request the employee overtime hours. So they're going to know up front, what are we asking for? And the city administrator must approve the overtime hours. And so internally, we're going to say, hey, employee, we know that we are going to request you to work these extra hours. Those are eligible for overtime hours. And because we will have that kind of a check prior to having those employees do overtime, then we will know who's going to pay for those. So that's where the negotiation comes in when we say, hey, chamber, this is going to be an extra couple $1,000s of overtime. And the chamber can say, okay, we'll figure something else out on that. Or we're willing to absorb that.
And so should we clarify that from what you described there? I think that says still days exceeds 12,000, then city administrator and chamber will negotiate? Because when we just say city will negotiate, who does that designate will be doing those negotiations?
In that case, I would say it will be between the chamber probably, and probably the liaison would be involved in that. We would tell you what those overtime hours are. I think it would be incumbent upon city administrator to say, here's what that total dollar amount is, chamber. Do you guys want to do that? And how are we going to pay for that? And then the chamber will say either we're going to, the chamber wants to cover that, or they'll ask the city to cover that.
Because in my mind, it could go to the city administrator, but it could only go within the budget, because any budget adjustment would then have to come back to the council. So that's why I would feel comfortable saying the city administrator, because the budgets are set. So if you want to use, and I'm assuming you're going to be talking with department heads as well, right?
Absolutely.
But I think it's good to clarify who the city is, so
I don't know that we need to clarify who the city is for their agreement, because as far as the chamber's concerned, they're dealing with the city, and whatever we decide internally to do, we'll work that out amongst ourselves. But I don't know that we have to tie that in there, and I'm just looking at Councilman Taylor's point of maybe not gumming up the agreement more than we need to.
And I just ran into trouble in the past with what responsibilities does that liaison role have? If they're responsible for the budget of still days, and I'm just talking prior to, there was some times that perhaps the administration felt I stepped on their toes, and perhaps where they stepped on my toes, and I don't know. Brad and I have had conversations about that in the past, so I just think it's good to clarify who's doing the negotiating and who's doing the approving on behalf of the city, so it's very clear who's going where and doing what.
Well, and on this, again, the council is free to make whatever choice they want, but my thoughts are, just like in anything as the city, any individual council member does not have authority, whether she's the liaison in this case or not, she doesn't. So the only people that are authorized to enter into agreements for the city are those that we've set out in our policy, and so those policies would apply here. If we deviate from them, if Mr. Bunker goes out of line and authorizes something outside of the budget, then that's something that you guys are going to have to handle. But otherwise, we just follow our normal policies.
Well, in the past, I think is somewhat truth, and that yes, those are set out, but who signs all the procedure? Anyway, I think you can go back and take a look where the council member has had to make decisions and has entered into contracts. And Casey, we've had discussions where I've signed contracts on behalf of Still Days all by myself because the dollar amount was below 10,000 and it followed our procurement policy. So again, there was somewhat of an administrative role given there through your council assignment. So I don't know. Food for thought.
I think there's a parallel here between this and the no-fault policy. You have city employees who make promises, and the public follows that. A group thinks that they have the permission, authority to do that, and they don't, and they didn't realize that. And if not that Councilwoman Carroll would make promises necessarily, but sometimes people say things and they're misconstrued. So we need to have this spelled out a little bit.
And again, that's the council's decision, but my comment would be to that, do we need to do that for every agreement that the city enters into? And I think that's why we have a policy, is so we follow the policy. Otherwise, you're going to be opening up Pandora's box as every contract we enter, then we're putting in that agreement who's authorized to do it. That's not the way it works. And there have been problems in the past with not just this city, every city, where somebody makes a representation, somebody relies on it, And there's some legal recourse that can come as a result of that. But I think generally the best practice is to stay within your policy, and that we put the city with a capital C in there, and then it's incumbent upon us as a city to follow our procedures and make sure we're doing things the right way.
Maybe we could just put a reference that city policy would apply in this contract.
I have, sorry, I have just one question and then one comment. 3.4, we've talked about the $12,000. I've heard reference off and on to the police in particular, but I don't see anything about the police in 3.4, but I thought I heard somebody say that was specific to the police. So I just want to make sure we understand that 12,000 is total overtime, if that's the intent of it, and then not the police. And then Councilmember Christensen is what you, Christiansen? Christiansen, okay, sorry. And I are going to start having a little competition here. These guys have already commented that I missed a typo, and it was brought up by her. But I did find one in here. Section 4.3, city shall responsible for insurance coverage. That little two-letter word B got left out of there. So you threw the gauntlet down, I picked it up. We're going to have a lot of fun over the next couple of years. That's right. It's part one. It's all in fun. I'm not after anybody. It's just the OCD kicks in. You guys that have been around know that. But one little tiny word.
Okay, I have a question. Casey, in regards to spelling out what the different things are as far as, you know, saying what it is to execute these programs, is it better to spell it out, or is it better to leave it vague as far as protecting the city?
And you're talking about the things that we're asking them to do, and we're
As far
talking
as-
about will or may or shall?
I'm referring mostly to like permitting or sales tax reporting, or, you know, things that are required under what it is to execute.
That's maybe a law school question.
Oh, well, sorry.
No, I mean, it's a good question, but whether it's better at times to just be more general or to be specific, that the concern with being specific is then if you miss something, then you say, well, I missed it. Where if you're general, you can say, well, we didn't know about that. So there's pitfalls with both ways. My opinion on this one, which somebody else could definitely have a differing opinion, my opinion is maybe try to split the baby a little bit with both, have a generic provision, and then identify some things specifically, but not limit it to that. Say, we're going to include this, this, and this, but also all other responsibilities associated with it.
So in 1.2, for instance, we could put reporting as well. So when we talk about plan and operate, we talk about the other elements we're going to put in there. We could put reporting, tax, you know, whatever that might be. Is that
Yeah, I mean, we could throw in the great legal term of shall include but be not limited to.
Okay, I'm gonna go ahead and make a motion. You guys are gonna hate me. I'm gonna motion that we table this and work through some of these things. Y'all can tell me how you feel.
I'm going to second that so that we can start a discussion.
How does the chamber feel about that? I think we're pretty close. I think that we're within a couple little items.
Yeah, I don't think there's a lot really to change based on the conversation here. So obviously the longer we put it off, then the longer it takes to get going. But we want to make sure that everybody's comfortable with the agreement that's in place. So
Are you comfortable with the current agreement?
I'm comfortable with the conversations we had with the changes that were mentioned by Rob and Clark and you. And I'd have to, again, this all goes back to, once you guys approve it, we still have to take it back to our board for final approval as well. And so Our board meets on Thursday. We have our monthly meeting. So if you were to put it off, then we would need to probably do it as an email vote as opposed to wait till our next board meeting, which is always the fourth Thursday of the month. Yeah.
That puts us 3 weeks away from meeting.
I'm going to make a substitute motion. I'm going to take a really crazy stab here, so bear with me. You ready, Terry Lynn? Yeah. All righty. So I'll make a motion that we approve the agreement with the Chamber of Commerce for the management of still days and concerts in the park, subject to the following changes. In section 1.1, we'll make the changement from may include the following events in the still day celebration, comma, coordinated with the city council liaison. I would strike item F from that, and in item G, add parentheses for the beautification committee. I would, oh, okay. I'd also like to make the change in 1.9 to the URL to be stilldaysaf.com versus the stilldays.com. And then in the financial section, 3.1, it to read, city agrees to contribute up to $20,000 to be paid for the to the chamber for the Still Days Celebration Fund out of the 2018 budget and annually thereof or thereafter. It'd just be annually, and then if the agreement is null and void, I assume it would be null and void. I would take and strike subsections 1.3's reference in section 4.1, and that has to do with the indemnification of things. And add Kevin's B in section 4.3 between the word shall and responsible. And then I would like to add, I'm not quite sure where to add that, maybe it's in the cooperation, including but not limited to the cooperation and the assignment of contracts as necessary. And then I'd also like to put in there some kind of a reference to Still Days dates being agreed upon by December 31st of the prior year, so that the chamber will present dates to the city to be considered and agreed upon by December 31st of the prior year. Is that good enough language?
Yes, close. I would just say that the city and chamber shall agree on the dates for Still Days, and if you want to set a date on or before December 31st is fine.
Okay.
But rather than they will present, adding that step, just we'll say we'll agree on it. And then the caveat I was going to put in before is going back to following the policy is, you said in coordination with the Still Days liaison. I think it ought to just be in coordination with the city or agreement with the city, and then again we'll handle that internally how that happens, so we don't run into the issue of are we giving our liaison authority or are we not. It's always dealing with the city, and then we'll decide how you deal with us.
Okay. I've just always seen those always historically been the responsibility liaison, but we're changing things, right? So that's okay. And then I wanted to add, and I apologize, I got to the end and had the reference back. So if we take a look back at section 1.2, to have it say chamber agrees it will plan and operate, and then I want to put in parentheses after that, including but not limited to all permitting necessary from government agencies and collection of sales tax as necessary. Would that be okay,
Can we
Casey?
say permits, comma, licenses, and then the rest, how you ordered it?
Okay. Is that clear as mud? I think that's my best attempt.
I second Rob's motion.
Would you please restate it?
Section 1.1, the word will.
I was going to do it from memory, Rob.
Okay, we have a motion by Councilman Shelton and a second by Councilman Taylor. I hate to ask any discussion on this motion.
Only thing I would ask is I really did in good faith work with various organizations. I would hope that that commitment would continue to those other organizations and really make them feel a part of it. I feel a great debt of gratitude for all those that jumped in the trench with me, and so any type of way we can show our appreciation back to them, I would highly recommend.
Thank you. All right, duly noted. Okay, we have a motion and a second to do a roll call vote. Councilmember Christiansen.
Aye.
Councilman Shelton.
Aye.
Councilmember Barnes.
Aye.
Councilmember Carroll.
Aye.
Councilmember Taylor.
Aye.
Okay, Chamber. I don't vote, but I'm going to give you an aye anyway. You have a unanimous vote from this council, from this city, and all that who represented. And we're looking forward to working with you. And if I've said this, but if it was in the Wild West, we could shake your hands and move from there. But otherwise, we've got to get these darn attorneys involved.
That's right. Well, to your point, Mayor, we understand the responsibility and the historical significance of Steel Days. And as a business community that fully supports the city celebration, we will not take that lightly, and we'll run with it.
Okay.
One last thing that's there, Brad, is if there's sorry, Mayor, grew up for many years as a different name there, so it's hard to give that up. But it was a good 4-letter versus a bad 4-letter, I knew. So anyway, I would just ask, I continue to get contacts even as of yesterday from city employees, and I don't think that has word made its way down to the trenches as to the new responsibilities that exist. So maybe a nice memo to them to let them know that Councilmember Carroll's now involved and the Chamber's involvement. And I'd be happy as a consultant to give me a call and answer any questions, but I'd love to pass that baton on at this point. So.
Yeah, I had a couple new assignments for you reach out to me today. They probably reached out to you. So things are shifting a little bit. Yeah. So. Absolutely, when we're deer hunting.
Mayor, if I would, just one comment question. Is the chamber okay with all of this as it has been revised, quote unquote? Are you comfortable with this? I don't want this to be one-sided. Don't want it.
So that question was asked last week at the work session. I'm surprised you didn't hear about it being on your cruise, but we've had a lot of conversation, and yes, we feel
you're okay with the changes that have been made tonight. I figured you were okay with everything up until this point, but
well,
I think it's good for the record in this
I've got
public
my treasurer
meeting.
and chair here. Do we have nods?
We're comfortable with the changes to take to our board for
Okay, and I think it's just important that be on the public record for this meeting.
And yeah, to Ryan's point, we will take this contract to the board, and we would have to have the board approve it as well, and then that would be the final step. So
I guess the ball's in your court. Is that easy to say? Okay.
That's right.
Okay. Thank you for everybody for their all the good input, good discussion. Okay. Item number 8 is consideration and action to enter into a closed session to discuss pending litigation. That will happen downstairs. And then we will, after that closed session, we will convene our regular city council from that location. And so I'm going to ask in that to have Chief Brims, Chief Falsliff attend that along with council, legal, and our city administrator. So
Mayor,
do I have an action? Do I have
I'll make a motion to enter into executive session.
Okay, have a motion by Councilman Shelton, seconded by Councilman Taylor. All in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Thank you.